Thank you for listening to the Ramble On Podcast Network. The following podcast was produced by members of the Highland Rambler from Highland High School in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Hey, I'm Malia Hansen. I'm a junior and I'm Asian and Pacific Islander.
And I'm Khatri. I'm a senior at Highland and I'm Nepali.
Welcome to our podcast about the BIPOC experience at Highland High, the BIPOC-cast.
Every episode will feature a different community and a student from that community. Today we'll be talking about the Hispanic community here at Highland.
And joining us today, we've got Rosa.
Hi there. My name is Rosa Castruita. I define as Hispanic Mexican American. And I'm a senior at Highland.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So our first question is, what is the Hispanic community's place at Highland?
I think that the Hispanic community's place at Highland is not very well defined. I know there's lots of us in the school as students, but when it comes to representation, I don't think it's well defined. Like, for example, in honors classes or in AP, you really don't see many of us in there. There's occasionally like one or two or three, if we're lucky to be in the same period. But other than that, it's not very well put. And then for like student SBOs, government, council, stuff like that, I don't really think there isn't representation. There might be like occasionally like there one person representing us like every year, but so far I don't really feel representative in that kind of area. I would say.
And I know that you have been in AP and honors classes, and you also ran for SBO. So could you talk about like your experience doing that and being like one of the few Hispanic people?
When I was in honors and AP classes, I was always considered the smartest one out of my friend group because everyone else would take regular classes. So they would always say that I was just the smart one because I was the one willing to do more work in that subject than anyone else. And then my experience as running for student body government, it was kind of scary and nervous because when I went to the parent meeting, it was just like, there's so many people. And then I felt like I stood out in general because I didn't feel like there was no one else that identified the same as me there.
Yeah.
So that was very nervous-wracking.
What would you say are some unique struggles that a lot of Hispanic students face, like at school, like maybe, for example, communication between the school and your parents, or anything like that?
I think a struggle is that, sorry about that. I think a struggle about that we tend to face is translating lots of times. Because I think most of us, our parents don't speak English. So it's up to us to make sure that the communication between school gets to home. And then there are times where the school will call our parents, but then they really can't answer because they just don't know what's going on. So they usually have to like be the ones like contacting back. I think another struggle is that some of them aren't used to the American education system because we have parents that come from different countries. So I think they're not used to it. So they really don't understand the difference between what they had to deal with back in their school ages, than what we have to deal as of right now, because it's very completely different.
Yeah. I guess something that's relevant to that right now is like the process of applying to college. So how would you say your experience applying to college has been affected by your identity?
I think that I was fortunate since I was willing to look for college programs that would help me out to prepare for college. But I would say that it was semi-hard because I had to focus on ACT, which my parents never even heard of. So it was hard to explain to them what it was. And then I had to explain that I needed letters of recognition because they didn't know what that was either. And then fast, so that was just completely hard because I had to ask private information from them, which was like, they kind of seemed they didn't want to give it out. Even though I needed it. But I think it was just really hard in general because I had to be the one on top of everything. And then, well, at the same time, I had to explain why I needed to do this and that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun.
Those are definitely really difficult to deal with, and I think it's amazing that you've dealt with them. Just a shout out because I think you're amazing. But
Yeah. And you're first gen, right?
I'm a first generation. So I don't know if people know what that means, but it means that I'm the very first one to go to college. I'm also going to be the very first one to graduate high school in my family.
that's amazing. Well, cool. That kind of brings us to our next question. What is a stereotype that the Hispanic community faces and what's harmful about it?
I think the most common one that we tend to face is that since most of the Hispanic community tends to be illegal immigrants, I tend to hear a lot of how we're trying to steal the jobs, or how like we have to speak English here in America because that's the language. And I think that's harmful because in reality, people can get jobs anywhere, especially those who are American citizens, because they have it much easier to get a job than illegal immigrants. Because for most jobs, you need a social security number, which illegal immigrants don't really have. And I think that's just harmful because they're trying to put a blame on something that illegal immigrants can't really control. Like, yes, they do come into the country to look for jobs and everything. But I think that the reason why jobs are open a lot is because you have people who really don't want to get a job in the first place. So I think that's a very harmful stereotype. The other one where like you have to speak English in this country, like that's just like dumb stereotype, because even though it's like a widely spoken language here, it's not the official language. You have more than like, because we all know English is not like the only language here. Like you have multiple, you have Spanish, you have German, French, like you have multiple from all around the world. And then just saying that you have to speak English in this country is just saying like you have to put a limitation to that, which I don't think that should be right. I think that, in my opinion, I think like it's very beneficial if you know more than one language, because you can use it on job as a base, and then you can use it in the future, and then it just looks good for you. And then one more stereotype I think is very harmful. It's saying that we're drug dealers, we're bring drugs into this country. And I don't think that's true, because we do have people who do that, but that shouldn't define us who we are. That shouldn't be a cover. And I think that's just extremely harmful, because you can have people who end up being biased to that, and that just brings us more harm than helping.
And how do you think those stereotypes affect students at school?
I think it could be very harmful, because I think it affects them to a point where like they think, oh, it's a stereotype. It's like, it's not even a stereotype, it's a real thing. So we have to come into what that stereotype is, which I think is just really bad and harmful, because it just ruins your future. Like you're setting yourself up to a pathway that wasn't even meant to be true. So I just think it's just not worth it at all.
Absolutely. That stereotype is just wrong on so many levels. I really don't even have words for it. Do you want to share maybe any like personal experiences with what's happened in your life with harmful stereotypes?
I mean, I was fortunate enough not to be experience those kinds of types, but I have had people where they tend to ignore me, and they prefer to go to my like recently I started working a new job, and I work as customer service. And then I had this person where there were 2 lines, and then I had this person where he would just ignore me completely, and he would just be talking to my partner, who was white.
Mm.
So I was just completely ignored to the side where it had to be like a team effort, which just made it harder for us. And then it was just holding up everyone. He was waiting behind them. So it's just like, but I was fortunate not to experience those, but I have known people who have experienced type of problems like that. And it's just messed up, general. Because it doesn't make us feel like humans.
Mm.
It doesn't make us feel like we're equals at all. And it's just like, that's not right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have today. But thank you so much for sharing and being so open. It was great to hear about your take and your experience.
Of course, thank you for having me.